My family cast me aside when I was unemployed. 5 years later, they marched in and said, "You don't have a family, we'll take the house." I said nothing, just called 911. There are words that carve themselves into your soul, words meant to utterly break you. For me, they came from my own father, delivered with chilling conviction. "You don't even have a family. We will take this house." He said it to my face, standing in the home I'd built from nothing, surrounded by my estranged family and their suitcases, 5 years after they'd abandoned me to homelessness. My world didn't just shatter, it ignited with a cold fury that pushed me to dial 3 numbers that changed everything. From the outside, we looked like any normal suburban Pennsylvania family. My dad, Richard, was a bank manager, always in a crisp suit, briefcase glued to his hand. My mom, Diane, a nurse, kept our modest 3-bedroom house spotless, even after grueling shifts. Then there was Brian, my older brother, 3 years my senior, and undeniably, the golden child. Our home was comfortable, not rich, not poor, just average. But beneath that veneer of normalcy, a chilling dynamic festered, shaping every fiber of my being. From as early as I can remember, I felt the stark difference in how we were seen. Brian was destined for greatness. His mediocre grades were cause for celebration. My excellent ones? Merely expected. When he snagged a partial scholarship to State University, they threw him a huge party, bought him a brand new car, and drained most of their savings to cover his tuition, ensuring he wouldn't be burdened with debt. Me? I was told in freshman year of high school that I would be working part-time to save for college. By 16, I was clocking 20 hours a week at the local diner, flipping pancakes and slinging burgers, hoarding every single penny. Straight A's, extracurriculars, none of it mattered. Prestigious universities were never even discussed for me. The message, though unspoken, thundered in my ears: Brian was the investment. I was the afterthought. The only beacon of light, the one person who truly saw me, was my Grandma Margaret, my mother's mother. She lived an hour away in a small, enchanting cottage, surrounded by a garden that, to my young eyes, felt utterly magical. Every summer, while Brian went to his expensive sports camps funded by my parents, I'd spend 3 blissful weeks with her. Those weeks were my salvation. "Sabrina," she'd say, her hands weathered from decades of gardening, gently guiding mine in the soil. "Never let anyone tell you what your worth is. Only you decide that." She'd look at me with those knowing blue eyes, adding, "And never depend on someone else to keep a roof over your head. Learn to build your own." Grandma Margaret embodied fierce independence. She'd raised 3 children mostly alone after my grandfather died when my mom was just 12, working as a seamstress to put them all through at least some college. Her unwavering strength became my North Star, especially when the air at home felt thick with unspoken judgment, suffocating me. As college loomed, the pressure from my parents became unbearable. My mother, in her infinite wisdom, had decided I would become a nurse. "It's a stable profession, Sabrina. You'll always have work," she'd insist, completely disregarding my utter lack of interest in medicine. My father would chime in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Creative careers are for people with family money to fall back on." What they couldn't grasp was that in my junior year, I'd found my passion, graphic design. My art teacher, Ms. Winters, saw something in me, an eye for composition, and introduced me to digital design. I devoured it, staying late after school, entering competitions. When I won a regional award, my parents brushed it off as a nice hobby, certainly not a real career. The tension hit its boiling point during senior year when college applications were due. I applied to local community colleges with strong design programs and several affordable state schools with arts. But when the acceptance letters arrived, my parents delivered their ultimatum: no financial help unless I switched to nursing or business. "We are not wasting money on an art degree," my father declared firmly at dinner. "If you want to throw away your future, you can pay for it yourself." I desperately searched my mother's face for support, but she simply stared at her plate. Brian, home from college, smirked across the table. "Maybe you should listen to Dad, Sabrina. Not everyone is cut out for a real career." That night, I cried myself to sleep, the rejection a crushing weight. But the next morning, a steely resolve settled in. I would attend community college, I would work full-time, and I would pursue my design degree, no matter what. When I announced it at breakfast, my father just shrugged. Your life, your mistake. I graduated with honors, moved into a tiny apartment with 2 roommates, and threw myself into community college. I juggled nearly 40 hours a week between a coffee shop and a retail job, all while pulling a 3.8 GPA in my design classes. Each visit to Grandma Margaret, drawing strength from her unwavering belief, became my lifeline. After 2 years, I transferred to a state university, continuing my graphic design degree. By then, my relationship with my parents was a fractured thing. Our interactions were reduced to strained holiday visits where my father would grill me about my income potential, and my mother would covertly slip me $20 bills, whispering, "In case you need to eat," as if I were still a helpless child. Brian, of course, had graduated, secured a job at a financial firm, a carbon copy of our father. Every family gathering became a stage for his triumphs, a spotlight on my supposed failures. Brian just got a promotion, my mother would gush, and he's looking at buying a condo downtown. The unspoken comparison hung heavy, a suffocating cloud. When I finally graduated at 22, after 4 years of living independently, I walked across that stage alone. My parents, predictably, chose to attend a conference related to Brian's work instead. Grandma Margaret, frail now with a walker, was the only family member in the audience. Her proud, tear-filled smile as I accepted my diploma meant more to me than 1,000 absent relatives. Degree in hand, I set my sights on Philadelphia, a city buzzing with design opportunities. I'd secured an internship that promised a path to full-time employment. The night before I left, sharing pie on her porch, I confessed my fears to Grandma Margaret. "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if they're right? What if I fail?" She took my hand, her blue eyes, sharp even at 82, met mine. "Sabrina," she whispered, "the only true failure is living someone else's dream. You follow your heart. And I will always be here if you need a soft place to land." With her words a shield against my doubts, I packed my ancient car the next morning, driving towards a future I was determined to build on my own terms, even if my family refused to believe in me. My first 2 years in Philadelphia were a grueling climb, but deeply rewarding. I moved from intern to junior designer at a small marketing agency. The pay was tight, but my portfolio was growing, and I was making connections. I shared a shabby 2-bedroom apartment with Jessica, a teacher, and we turned it into a cozy home with thrift store treasures. I called Grandma Margaret every week. Visited when I could. Contact with my parents? It withered to obligatory birthday calls and tense Thanksgiving dinners, punctuated by my mother's endless updates on Brian's latest promotion or his downtown condo purchase. It was always a subtle jab, a reminder of my lesser path. Then, 5 years ago, my world imploded. The recession hit our industry like a sledgehammer. My agency lost major clients, and one Monday morning, we arrived to find the doors locked, a bankruptcy notice taped to the window. Just like that, I was unemployed. I scrambled, freelancing, applying for every design job imaginable. But budgets were slashed, and I was among the first cuts. My meager savings evaporated, eaten by rent and groceries. Jessica, bless her heart, helped with utilities and shared her teacher's lounge leftovers, but she wasn't exactly flush herself. After 3 months of scarce work and mounting bills, the eviction warning arrived. I'd made partial payments, but my landlord's patience had run out. Jessica was moving in with her boyfriend next month, and I had no way to cover the full rent. Panic, raw and visceral, seized me. I was weeks away from homelessness. With nowhere left to turn, I swallowed my pride, a pride they had systematically dismantled, and called my parents. The phone rang 4 agonizing times before my mother answered with a distracted hello. "Mom, it's Sabrina," I managed, my voice already trembling. I need help." A pause. I heard her call to my father, "Richard, it's Sabrina." I explained my desperate situation, trying to sound calm, asking for just 1 month's rent. I promised, swore, I'd pay them back with interest. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, my father's voice, colder than any winter wind, cut through the line. Sabrina, this is exactly what we warned you about. This unstable career path, it's led you precisely where we predicted. Tears were streaming down my face. Dad, please, I whispered, I just need a little help to get back on my feet. I have interviews, but I need somewhere to live. We've been supporting Brian with his MBA tuition, my mother interjected, her voice carefully flat. We simply don't have extra funds right now. I knew it was a lie. They always had money for Brian. What she meant was, they had no money for me. You made your bed when you ignored our advice, my father continued, his voice devoid of compassion. Perhaps this will teach you to make more practical decisions. The call ended. No offer of help. No temporary shelter. Nothing. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes, sobbing until my lungs ached. That night, I tried Grandma Margaret, but no answer. The next day, her neighbor told me she was in the hospital with pneumonia. I wanted so desperately to go to her, but I had no money for the trip, no place to leave my few belongings. 2 weeks later, the eviction was final. Jessica helped me load my life, my design equipment, my clothes, a few cherished items, into my beat-up 12-year-old Honda Civic. The rest went into a cheap storage unit, paid for with my last $100. With no other choice, I drove to my parents' house. It was a bleak, rainy October evening. I saw their shadows moving inside, watching TV in the living room. For 20 agonizing minutes, I sat in my car, mustering every ounce of courage before I finally walked up and rang the doorbell. My father answered, his surprise quickly curdling into disgust as he took in my disheveled appearance, the desperation etched on my face. Sabrina, what are you doing here? Dad, I lost my apartment. I just need a place to stay for a few weeks, until I can find work and save up. Please. He looked past me, his gaze sweeping over my car, crammed with my few possessions, and frowned. This is exactly what happens with these artistic careers. Instability. Richard, who is it? My mother appeared behind him, her face hardening when she saw me. Our daughter seems to have found herself homeless, he replied, not even attempting to hide his disdain. I'm not homeless, I choked out, my voice breaking. I need family right now. My father crossed his arms, a barrier. You chose your path, Sabrina. You chose to ignore our guidance. Now you need to take responsibility for those choices. We're hosting the neighborhood association meeting tomorrow, my mother added, as if that trumped my literal homelessness. This really isn't a good time. I stood there, rain soaking through my jacket, watching my own parents turn me away. You've made it clear you don't need our input in your life decisions, my father stated firmly. You cannot reject our advice and then expect our support when those decisions lead to hardship. With that, he closed the door. The finality of it was a physical blow. I remained on that porch for several minutes, rain washing over me, before slowly returning to my car. I sat there in their driveway, watching their oblivious shadows move behind the curtains, waiting. Hoping they'd change their minds. Hoping they'd come out. They never did. Eventually, I drove to a Walmart parking lot. That night, I slept in my reclined driver's seat, $25 to my name, nowhere to go. I called and texted Brian, pleading for help, but my messages went unanswered. For 2 weeks, I existed in my car, showering at a gym, clinging to library Wi-Fi for job searches. I called my parents relentlessly, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails that vanished into the void. One night, I drove past their house and saw Brian's car. The entire family, perfectly whole, together, inside. And I was out here. It was the absolute lowest point of my life. I felt utterly abandoned, cast adrift, without a home or a family to turn to. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had slammed the door in my face, all because I dared to forge my own path, rather than the one they'd so meticulously chosen for me. One biting cold November morning, I sat hunched in a coffee shop, nursing a single cup of tea, using their free Wi-Fi to scour for design gigs and affordable housing. Weeks of living in my car had taken their toll. My clothes were a wrinkled mess, my hair disheveled, my eyes hollow despite desperate attempts at gym showers. I was so lost in the glow of my laptop that I didn't notice someone approaching until a voice cut through the haze. Sabrina? Sabrina Wilson? I looked up, and my heart seized. It was Eleanor Garcia, a former colleague from the marketing agency, looking polished and successful in her smart pea coat, everything I wasn't. Eleanor. Hi, I mumbled, instantly self-conscious. I thought that was you. I've been trying to reach you. All the company emails died when the agency closed. She slid into the chair opposite me, either genuinely not noticing or gracefully ignoring my unkempt state. How have you been? Working somewhere new? I desperately wanted to lie, to maintain some semblance of success, but I was too utterly exhausted for pretense. Not exactly. I've been freelancing, but it's been really slow. Actually, I'm kind of between places right now. Eleanor's casual friendliness dissolved into genuine concern. Between places, as in housing? I nodded, fighting back a fresh wave of mortifying tears. It's been a rough few months. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping. Sabrina, are you living in your car? That direct question shattered what little composure I had left. I nodded again, tears finally spilling down my cheeks, unable to speak. Eleanor immediately moved her chair closer, gently putting a hand on my arm. Why didn't you reach out to any of us? The whole team has been checking in since the closure. I didn't want anyone to know how badly I was failing, I confessed, shame burning my cheeks. Everyone else seemed to land on their feet. Eleanor shook her head. Trust me, everyone struggled. I was unemployed for 6 weeks before I found something. She paused, her gaze searching. When was the last time you ate a proper meal? The question hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't remember. It had been granola bars and dollar menu items for weeks. Come on, Eleanor said, standing up with a sudden resolve. Pack your stuff. You're coming with me. Before I could protest, she was helping me gather my laptop and bag, insisting I leave my car in the coffee shop lot for now. 30 minutes later, I was in her warm apartment, eating the most delicious sandwich and soup I'd ever tasted. After I finished, she showed me to her spare bedroom. It's not much, but it's a real bed, and it's yours for as long as you need it, she said, placing fresh towels on the dresser. I was overwhelmed, tears stinging my eyes. Eleanor, I can't accept this. We were just coworkers. We were a team, she corrected gently. And now we're friends. That's what friends do. She sat on the edge of the bed. Besides, I might have a job opportunity for you. Eleanor explained that her boyfriend, Michael, ran a small design studio focused on web development. They needed someone to assist with graphic elements and UI design. The pay was modest, but it was steady. I can't promise anything, she cautioned. But I'll talk to him tonight. In the meantime, take a shower, get some real sleep. We'll figure this out together. The next morning, I met Michael. His studio was small but growing, and after reviewing my portfolio, he offered me a position on the spot. It was entry-level, a step back, but it was work. A regular paycheck. I accepted immediately. That afternoon, Eleanor helped me retrieve my car and the few possessions that had become my entire life. As we organized the spare room, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Is this Sabrina Wilson? A voice asked. Yes, this is she. This is Nancy Holden, your grandmother's neighbor. I've been trying to reach you. Your grandmother's condition has worsened. The doctors aren't optimistic. My heart plummeted. In the terrifying whirlwind of my own crisis, I hadn't been able to check on Grandma Margaret. We'd missed each other's calls. She's been asking for you, Nancy continued. I think you should come if you can. I explained, broken, to Eleanor, who didn't hesitate. We'll go right now, she insisted, immediately calling Michael to reschedule my first day. We arrived at the hospital just after 9 that evening. Grandma Margaret, so small, so frail, lay connected to tubes and monitors. But her eyes, those same sharp blue eyes, lit up when she saw me. She reached out a trembling hand. "My Sabrina," she whispered. "I knew you'd come." I sat with her through the long night, holding her hand, telling her about my new job opportunity. I shielded her from the brutal truth of my homelessness, my parents' rejection. She was too weak for such pain. Instead, I focused on the glimmer of hope Eleanor had given me. "Thanks to Eleanor," she murmured, "I always told you. You make your own way." In the quiet pre-dawn hours, she asked me to retrieve a small box from her purse. Inside, a key and a folded document. "My will," she explained softly. "The house is yours. Always meant for you." I tried to protest, to tell her she'd recover, that she'd return home, but she shook her head, her voice surprisingly firm despite her weakness. "Listen now. You have the spirit, the strength. Brian has your parents. You need roots." 2 days later, Grandma Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep, her hand still in mine. Grief was a heavy cloak, but I had to navigate the practicalities. The hospital contacted my parents, who arrived for the funeral arrangements, somber but conspicuously uninvolved. Then came the reading of the will. Their demeanor shifted dramatically. Grandma Margaret had indeed left her beloved cottage and her modest savings to me, with only small mementos for my mother and Brian. My father's face darkened with a fury I'd rarely seen. My mother burst into tears. "Mother always favored you," she wailed, accusing me. I said nothing. The lawyer handed me the keys. I began the surreal process of moving into my unexpected inheritance. The cottage reflected Grandma Margaret's 85 years, charming, well-maintained, but definitely needing updates. Still, it was mine. A home. A sanctuary no one could take from me. Eleanor helped me move in, bringing essentials and spending a weekend helping me clean. "It has good bones," she declared, scrubbing the kitchen. "An amazing natural light for a home office." For the first time in months, I fell asleep feeling utterly safe, a profound sense of possibility blossoming within me. In Grandma Margaret's overgrown, yet still beautiful, garden, I could almost hear her voice. "You build your own shelter, Sabrina. You always could." With a roof securely over my head and a steady remote job, I finally began to rebuild my life, piece by painful piece. I transformed the small front room into a home office, investing in new equipment. Michael was thrilled with my work, gradually increasing my responsibilities and my pay. The cottage itself became my passion project. I tackled one room at a time, carefully preserving Grandma Margaret's unique charm while infusing my own style. And the garden, her pride and joy, became my weekend sanctuary. I knew nothing about plants, but I bought books, watched videos, and slowly coaxed the overgrown beds back to vibrant life. Life in a small town was an adjustment after years in the city. At first, still raw from my family's betrayal, I kept to myself, wary of any new connections. But small towns have a way of gently pulling you in. It started with Mrs. Jenkins, my next-door neighbor, who brought over a casserole to welcome me, despite having known me as Margaret's granddaughter for years. Then Tom from the hardware store started setting aside vintage doorknobs he thought would suit the cottage. Soon, I was exchanging waves and small talk with people on my way to the post office or grocery. 6 months in, I found my first real friend in town. I'd been frequenting the local bookstore, partly for design inspiration, partly for the amazing coffee. The owner, Patrick Lewis, was about my age, having inherited the store from his uncle. "You're going to wear that design book out," he'd commented one day as I bought yet another coffee, browsing the same interior design volume. "Why not just buy it already?" "Budget constraints," I admitted with a smile. "I'm renovating bit by bit." The next day, I walked in to find the book, wrapped in brown paper, behind the counter. A note attached read, "Renovation consultant fee. Your coffee wisdom has improved our menu. Patrick." We became friends over books and coffee, sharing recommendations then meals. Patrick was easy, devoid of the judgment I'd grown so accustomed to. When I finally poured out my whole story, he listened without interruption. Your parents sound like real pieces of work, was his only comment. Their loss. As my design skills sharpened and my client list grew, I decided to take a leap. Using my carefully hoarded savings, I launched my own small studio, Elevation Designs, focusing on branding for small businesses. My time with Michael had shown me a gaping need: local businesses struggling with visual identity, unable to afford big agencies. I started with a website, business cards, and then began approaching local shops and restaurants. My first client? Patrick, who needed a new logo and signage for the bookstore. Word spread like wildfire. Within a year, I had enough clients to leave Michael's company, though we maintained a collaborative relationship. As my business flourished, so did my investment in the cottage. I replaced the aging roof, updated the ancient heating system, renovated the kitchen with modern appliances while preserving Grandma Margaret's beloved cabinets. The property value soared, but that was secondary to creating a home that honored her, while reflecting me. The garden, under my increasingly confident care, thrived. I added a small patio for outdoor work and a fire pit for evening relaxation. Patrick often joined me there, bringing books, listening to my ideas. By the 5th anniversary of Grandma Margaret's passing, my life had utterly transformed. Elevation Designs employed 3 people, operating from a converted garage on my property. I was a respected member of the community, even helping organize the annual arts festival. My relationship with Patrick had deepened into something far beyond friendship, though we were building it slowly, valuing our independence. My circle of friends now included Eleanor and Michael, who visited regularly, and a growing network of local connections. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Brian since the funeral. Occasionally, a Christmas card arrived, no personal message, just their printed names. I'd send similar impersonal cards in return, unwilling to sever the last fragile thread, but fiercely protecting myself from further hurt. The cottage, once my grandmother's haven, had become my own sanctuary. My success story? The girl who'd slept in her car now owned a debt-free home, ran a profitable business, and had forged a life rich with meaningful connections. I had done exactly what Grandma Margaret believed I could do, built my own shelter, both physically and emotionally. What I didn't realize was that this hard-won peace was about to be brutally shattered by the very people who had once turned me away. By the way, if you're still with me, riding this roller coaster of betrayal and resilience, please hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next, or the other unbelievable stories I have coming your way. The first crack in my hard-won peace came with an email from Brian. An ordinary Tuesday morning, and his name in my inbox after 5 years of absolute silence. My coffee instantly tasted bitter. The subject line, touching base, Dear Sabrina. The message itself was a masterclass in artificial warmth. It's been too long. I saw your website, so impressed. Mom and Dad mentioned they haven't heard from you, worried. Hope all is well. Let's catch up soon, Brian. There was no acknowledgement of their silence when I was desperate, no mention of their cruel rejection. Just a casual touching base, as if we'd simply lost track of each other through mutual neglect. I showed it to Patrick at lunch. Sounds like someone wants something, he commented, handing my phone back. People don't usually resurface after 5 years just to say hello. I nodded. The same cold suspicion had already settled in my gut. The timing's strange. Why now? Are you going to respond? He asked. Not yet. I want to see if there's more to this sudden interest. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, my phone rang. My parents' number. After half a decade of silence, the sight of it was so jarring, I answered without thinking. Sabrina, darling. My mother's voice, artificially bright, chirped, It's so good to finally hear your voice. Mom, I replied, my tone deliberately neutral. This is unexpected. Well, we've been thinking about you so much lately. Brian mentioned he reached out, and hadn't heard back, so we were worried. I've been busy, I stated, a defensive edge in my voice. Running my business takes a lot of time. Yes, we saw your website. Very impressive, honey. Your father and I were just saying how proud we are of what you've accomplished." Their pride felt utterly hollow, a bitter echo after years of criticism and abandonment. My mother pressed on. "Anyway, we feel terrible about the misunderstandings in the past. Family is so important, and we would just love to reconnect. Perhaps we could come visit you soon?" "Misunderstandings?" I repeated, the word a poison on my tongue. "Is that what you call turning away your own daughter when she was homeless?" A beat of silence. Then my mother, her voice now lower, almost a practiced whisper. "We all made mistakes, Sabrina. We were going through a difficult time ourselves. But that's in the past. We should focus on rebuilding our relationship now." Something in her tone, a carefully rehearsed quality, sent a shiver down my spine. I agreed to think about a visit, without committing to any dates, and ended the call as quickly as possible. That evening, Brian called. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hey sis," he said with forced cheer. "Mom said you two spoke. It's great we're all reconnecting." "What's going on, Brian?" I asked, cutting straight to it. "Why the sudden family reunion interest after 5 years?" He laughed, a strained sound. "Can't a brother want to reconnect?" "But since you asked, things have been challenging lately." For the next 20 minutes, Brian unveiled their current reality. He made a string of terrible investment decisions, wiping out most of his savings and sinking deep into debt. My father had been forced into early retirement after an internal investigation uncovered irregularities in his bank management. No criminal charges, but his reputation was in tatters. My mother had developed debilitating back problems, unable to work full nursing shifts. "We've had to downsize significantly," Brian explained. "The condo was foreclosed, and Mom and Dad had to sell the house. They're in a tiny apartment now." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and genuinely meant it, despite everything. "That must be difficult." "Yeah, well, family has to stick together in tough times, right?" The irony of his statement was completely lost on him. "Anyway, we were thinking we could come visit next weekend. Get to know your town, see Grandma's old place, reconnect." I reluctantly agreed to a Saturday lunch, setting a firm boundary: a brief visit, no overnight stay. As soon as I hung up, I called Patrick. "They're coming Saturday," I told him. "And from what Brian said, they're in deep financial trouble. Want me to be there?" Patrick offered immediately. I accepted gratefully. A cold knot of anxiety was already tightening in my stomach. That Saturday, my family arrived, their once confident presence now diminished by their recent misfortunes. My mother enveloped me in a teary hug, while Brian, ever the opportunist, hung back, his gaze systematically sweeping over the cottage with undisguised interest. "You've done wonders with the place," my mother gushed during my brief tour. "It's so much nicer than when your grandmother lived here." "Grandmother kept it perfectly nice," I corrected, a sharp edge to my voice. "I've just updated some things, while maintaining her style." "Must have cost a fortune," my father remarked, his eyes dissecting the new kitchen appliances. "Seems like your little design business is doing well." "Elevation Designs is doing very well," Patrick interjected smoothly, stepping forward. "Sabrina has clients across 3 states now." My father's eyes narrowed, clearly not expecting me to have backup. "And you are Patrick Lewis?" "I own the bookstore in town," Patrick replied, unflustered. "And I've known Sabrina since she moved here." Lunch was a tense dance, my parents and Brian alternating between insincere compliments about the house and not-so-subtle laments about their struggles. My mother mentioned their cramped apartment 3 times. Brian droned on about the impossible job market. As they prepared to leave, Brian excused himself to the bathroom. He was gone for an unusually long time. When he finally reappeared, his phone was conspicuously in his hand. "Getting good reception here," he commented casually. "The cottage has really solid bones. Good investment property." After they finally left, Patrick helped me clean up. "Well, that was uncomfortable," he said, loading the dishwasher. "Did you notice your brother taking pictures of every room?" I nodded, a sick dread settling in my stomach. My father asking about property values, my mother commenting on how much space there is for just one person. They're planning something, Patrick confirmed, voicing my darkest fear. Be careful, Sabrina. The following week brought a barrage of calls. My mother wanted recipes. My father had questions about the heating system. Brian wondered if I had Grandma Margaret's original deed. Each conversation felt like a calculated probe, testing for vulnerabilities. The sickening truth became crystal clear during their second visit 2 weeks later. As we sat in the garden, my father, with all the grace of a bulldozer, finally broached the subject. Sabrina, your mother and I have been thinking. This house has 3 bedrooms, and you're just one person. We're really struggling in that tiny apartment. It would make perfect sense for us to move in here. A family home should house a family, after all. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. This is my home, I finally managed, my voice strained. I inherited it from grandmother. Yes, but surely she intended it to benefit the whole family? My mother interjected, ever the enabler. She wouldn't have wanted us struggling while you have all this space. Actually, I shot back, anger sparking. She specifically left it to me because she knew I would care for it properly. And because she knew I was the only one who truly appreciated it. Well, regardless of her intentions, my father said dismissively, we are family. We should support each other. Brian could take the room above the garage, and your mother and I would take the master bedroom. That's my office, I said, incredulous, where I run my business. You could move your little computer to the dining room, my mother suggested, as if it were a simple rearrangement. It would be a much more efficient use of the space. This is not happening, I stated, my voice firm and unwavering. I'm sorry for your situation, but you cannot move in here. The conversation spiraled, my father growing increasingly insistent, my mother weaving between guilt trips and passive-aggressive jabs. Brian, meanwhile, remained suspiciously quiet, typing furiously on his phone. After they left, I immediately called my lawyer, the same one who'd handled Grandma Margaret's will. I explained the outrageous proposition. Everything's in order, he assured me. The house is solely in your name. They have no legal claim to it whatsoever. Despite this reassurance, I followed Patrick's suggestion and installed security cameras covering every entrance. A cold dread told me this confrontation was far from over. 3 weeks after that infuriating visit, I flew to Boston for a design conference, a crucial opportunity. Patrick offered to check on the house, but with the bookstore to run, he could only drive by. On the second evening, as I networked at a reception, my phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Jenkins, my neighbor. Thought you were away until tomorrow. Saw lights on in your house and people moving around inside. Everything okay? My blood ran cold. I called her immediately. Mrs. Jenkins, I'm still in Boston. There shouldn't be anyone in my house. Oh dear, she replied, her voice laced with concern. Should I call the police? No, let me check my security cameras first, I said, forcing calm into my trembling voice. I'll call you right back. My fingers shook as I opened the security app. The footage flashed on my screen, my father's car in the driveway. 3 figures. Unloading boxes. Suitcases. Disbelief warred with a searing rage. I watched, horrified, as my father used something to force the back door lock, then ushered my mother and Brian inside. They weren't visiting. They were moving in. I immediately called Patrick. They're breaking into my house. I choked out, my voice ragged with fury and shock. They're moving in while I'm gone. I'll drive over right now, he promised. Should I call the police? Not yet, I stammered, still reeling from the sheer audacity of it. Let me try calling them first. I called my father's cell, watching on the camera as he glanced at the screen, then declined the call. My mother. Brian. Same result. Finally, I called the landline I'd installed in the cottage. After several rings, Brian answered, his voice sickeningly casual. Hello, Wilson residence. Brian, what the hell are you doing in my house? There was a pause. A sigh. Sabrina, we were going to call you tomorrow. We're just getting settled in. Getting settled in? You broke into my house. You're trespassing. Don't be dramatic, he replied coolly. This is a family home. We're family. Besides, it's not like you need all this space just for yourself. I heard my father's voice in the background, and Brian partially covered the phone. I could still make out, tell her we'll discuss it when she returns. The decision has been made. You need to leave right now, I stated, struggling to control the volcano of anger erupting inside me. I'm calling the police if you're not out of my house in 30 minutes. Brian's voice hardened. That would be a mistake, Sabrina. We have nowhere else to go. And calling the police on your own family would be cruel. Besides, Mom and Dad are the ones with the real family connection to this house, not you. It's my house, Brian. Grandmother left it to me. A technicality he dismissed. Anyway, we've already spoken to a lawyer about challenging the will. Grandma was old, not entirely competent when she made those arrangements. We have a good case for overturning it. The threat sent a chill, cold and sharp, through my entire body. I knew they had no legal ground, but the idea of a protracted court battle, it was daunting. I ended the call, my mind racing. I immediately booked a flight home for the next morning, missing the final day of the conference. Patrick met me at the airport, his face grim. They're still there, he reported. I went by this morning. Your father answered the door, told me it was a family matter, and to mind my own business. Did you call the police? I asked, my voice tight as we drove towards the cottage. I thought that should be your decision, he replied. But I did speak to your lawyer. He said their claims about challenging the will are nonsense. Your grandmother had regular cognitive assessments, and was fully competent when she updated her will. When we pulled into the driveway, I was met with a scene that made my stomach churn. My mother's decorative pillows on my porch swing. My father's golf clubs leaning by my front door. They hadn't just broken in, they had literally moved in, assuming ownership in my absence. I took a deep, fortifying breath and entered my own home with my key. The scene inside was worse than I could have imagined. My carefully curated living room was rearranged, my parents' boxes stacked haphazardly. Family photos I had consciously removed years ago now sat on the mantel, replacing my own. My mother emerged from the kitchen, startled. Sabrina! We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. Clearly, I replied, my voice dangerously cold. Where's Dad? In the master bedroom, organizing his clothes. The casual way she referred to my bedroom sent a jolt of pure fury through me. I found my father hanging his suits in my closet, my own clothes shoved aside. Brian was in the room above the garage, my office, where he pushed my design equipment into a corner to make space for his bed. I gathered them all in the living room, Patrick a silent, steady presence behind me. You all need to leave, I stated firmly, my voice cutting through the tense air. Now. Sabrina, be reasonable, my father began, his usual authoritative tone back, but now laced with a desperate edge. This arrangement makes sense for everyone. You have this big house all to yourself while we've been struggling, a situation of your own making, I cut him off, and completely irrelevant to my home ownership. You don't even have a real family, my mother spat, a surprising venom in her voice. No husband, no children, just you and your little business. We need this house more than you do. That's not how property ownership works, Patrick interjected calmly. My father whirled on him, a furious glare. This doesn't concern you. This is between family. Patrick is more family to me than any of you have ever been, I retorted, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. He didn't abandon me when I was homeless and desperate. Ancient history, Brian waved dismissively, still tapping on his phone. We're here now, ready to be a family again. After you've depleted your resources and need something from me, I said, the words burning with years of resentment. This isn't about family. This is about you wanting my house. We will take this house, my father stated flatly, dropping all pretense, his eyes fixed on me with disturbing intensity. One way or another. We've already spoken to a lawyer about our options. Your non-existent options, I corrected, my voice unwavering. The house is legally mine. For now, he said, with chilling confidence, "but we have documented evidence of your grandmother's declining mental state. And as her direct descendants, we have a strong case for rightful inheritance." I knew he was bluffing, but the emotional toll was immense. This confrontation had gone far enough. Without another word, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "What are you doing?" my mother shrieked, her eyes wide with panic. "Calling the police to report trespassers in my home," I replied, my voice steady, defiant. "We are not trespassers. We are your family," she wailed. "Family doesn't break into each other's homes," I said into the phone as the dispatcher answered. I reported the situation, providing my address, explaining that people had entered my home without permission and were refusing to leave. My father lunged for the phone, but Patrick, quick as a flash, stepped between us. "Don't make this worse," he warned my father. The next 15 minutes stretched into an eternity of tense, seething silence. When 2 officers finally knocked on the door, I answered, explaining everything, showing them my ID and the deed to the property. "These people entered my home without permission while I was out of town," I explained, gesturing to the forced lock on the back door. My father tried to argue it was a family disagreement, not a police matter. But the officers were unyielding. "Sir, if you do not have legal residence here, and the homeowner wants you to leave, you need to leave," the older officer stated firmly. "Otherwise, you will be arrested for trespassing." "This is ridiculous." "She's my daughter," my father protested, his voice cracking with outrage. "That does not give you the right to enter her property without permission," the officer replied. "You have 30 minutes to collect your immediate belongings. Anything else can be arranged for pickup at a later date." As they gathered their belongings under the cold, watchful eyes of the police, my mother approached me, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to your own parents?" she wailed. I met her gaze steadily, unflinchingly. "The same way you could turn away your daughter when she had nowhere else to go." The security footage of their break-in was provided to the police, who advised me on obtaining a restraining order. My lawyer filed the paperwork the very next day, and within a week, a temporary order was granted, legally barring my family from my property. Watching the police escort my parents and brother from my home was a complex hurricane of emotions. There was profound pain at the depth of their betrayal, searing anger at their entitlement, but most powerfully, a sense of righteous validation. For the first time, I had finally, definitively, stood my ground against their manipulation and emotional abuse. That night, after securing the house with new, unbreachable locks, I sat with Patrick on the porch swing my grandmother had loved so dearly. "You did the right thing," he assured me, his arm a comforting weight around my shoulders. "I know," I replied, watching the first stars emerge in the evening sky. "It just shouldn't have had to come to this." The legal battle, though one-sided in its merit, dragged on for several months. The temporary restraining order became permanent when irrefutable evidence of their premeditated plan emerged. Text messages recovered from Brian's phone chillingly detailed their scheme to move in during my absence, and claim emotional duress if I tried to evict them. Their bluff about challenging Grandma Margaret's will was exposed as utterly baseless. My lawyer presented her medical records, confirming her sound mental state up until her passing. My father and Brian faced minor criminal charges, probation, and community service. Throughout it all, they clung to their narrative. They'd done nothing wrong, family property should be shared. My mother, however, slowly began to show flickers of regret as the harsh consequences of their actions became undeniable. 3 weeks after the court hearing, a handwritten letter arrived from her. Unlike their previous entitled and defensive tones, her words seemed genuinely remorseful. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote, "but I need you to know that I see now how terribly we failed you. Not just in these recent events, but throughout your life. Your father and Brian are still angry, but I cannot continue pretending what we did was justified. When you needed us most, we turned you away. There is no excuse for that." The letter stirred a complicated mix of feelings. A part of me longed to believe in her remorse, to hope for healing. But another part, hardened by years of neglect, remained fiercely wary of further manipulation. After careful consideration, I sent a brief, civil response, acknowledging her apology without offering immediate reconciliation. Trust, once broken so thoroughly, could not be quickly rebuilt. The experience left deep emotional scars that demanded professional healing. I began seeing a therapist specializing in family trauma and joined a support group for people with toxic family relationships. Hearing shared stories of similar betrayals helped me understand that my situation wasn't unique, and that setting firm boundaries wasn't just acceptable, but absolutely vital for my recovery. Family isn't defined by blood, my therapist often reminded me. It's defined by consistent love, respect, and support. This truth resonated profoundly as I reflected on who had actually provided those things in my life: Patrick, whose steadfast presence had become the unshakable cornerstone of my happiness; Eleanor, who had extended a literal lifeline when I was at my lowest point; the incredible community of neighbors and fellow small business owners who had welcomed me without judgment. My relationship with Patrick deepened exponentially through these challenging months. His unwavering support during the family crisis solidified what genuine partnership looked like. On the first anniversary of the break-in incident, he proposed to me in Grandma Margaret's garden, now flourishing with the perennials I'd planted in her memory. "You deserve a family who sees your worth," he said, offering a simple, elegant ring. "I'd be honored to start that family with you." 6 months later, we married in a small, intimate ceremony in that very garden. Eleanor was my maid of honor, and Michael stood with Patrick. My parents and Brian were not invited, a boundary that fiercely protected the pure joy of that day. Instead, I was surrounded by the family I had chosen. People who had proved their love through actions, not just biological connection. As my life settled into this new, beautiful normal, I found myself contemplating how to transform my painful experiences into something meaningful. The cottage, once a source of conflict, became a sanctuary not just for me, but for others in need. I established a small foundation in Grandma Margaret's name, providing temporary housing and career mentorship for young adults facing homelessness due to family rejection. "Everyone deserves a safe place to land," I explained to the local paper when they covered the foundation's launch, "and everyone deserves the chance to build their own success story." The first recipient was Jamie, a 22-year-old graphic design student whose parents had cut her off when she changed her major from business to art. The parallels to my own journey were incredibly striking. I offered her the apartment above the garage, now converted into a proper living space, and an internship at Elevation Designs. Watching her confidence bloom reminded me powerfully of my own path. 5 years after being abandoned by my biological family, I had built something far stronger, far more resilient than the ties that had failed me. I had built a home, a thriving business, a marriage, and a purpose that honored Grandma Margaret's belief in me, while extending that same vital support to others. I occasionally received updates about my parents and Brian through mutual acquaintances. My father never acknowledged his wrongdoing, stubbornly maintaining that I was selfish and unforgiving. Brian had moved to another state, attempting to start fresh after his financial missteps. My mother, remarkably, had separated from my father and was attempting to rebuild her life independently, a development that suggested she, at least, had learned something profound from our family's implosion. The door to reconciliation remained theoretically open, but with conditions that fiercely honored my self-worth. Any relationship would need to be built on genuine respect, not mere convenience or need. Until then, I focused on nurturing the healthy connections that had truly proved their value. On quiet evenings, sitting in Grandma Margaret's flourishing garden with Patrick, I often reflected on the winding journey that had brought me here. From homelessness to homeowner, from abandoned daughter to community supporter, I had discovered that family was not a birthright, but a sacred privilege earned through consistent love and respect. I had to learn that having no family is better than having one that actively hurts you. And that creating your own family of choice is not just possible, but often far more fulfilling than desperately clinging to toxic blood ties. The cottage, my grandmother's legacy, had become more than just a house. It was physical proof that I deserved to take up space in the world, that my dreams and my boundaries truly mattered. By defending it against those who would take it from me, I had finally, definitively, defended my own worth. Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with family members who tried to take advantage of you? Or perhaps you've built your own chosen family that lifted you up when your biological one failed? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to hear your stories.